So thank you so much everyone for being here on a Saturday evening. I am the project lead for the India Justice Report, and the panel here is made up of people who are our partners in this. Before that, I would like Maja to please open this formally on behalf of the whole team. This session on stories from the justice system. Maja, please.
Hi, good evening. I am formally opening this. I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to formally open, but we're very grateful to Agami, and we really enjoy partnering with them. It's been easy peasy to do that. And it's lovely to have the colleagues who I've been working with, like Sugandha and Devyani and Surya and his team. What I would like to say is that for whoever is listening, that one of the things that I find very valuable and something worth being an exemplar of, and something that we should be thinking more and more of, particularly in these times, which are fairly tough on health and money, etc., is how easy and pleasantly we have worked with our 6 partners, and how much we have benefited. When I say we have all benefited from it. From Common Cause, we have had so much information about what the grassroots of policing is all about, what they're thinking about, much more sociological. From CHRI, we've learned so much about the statistical, about the continuous work of years and years that creates the statistical basis, where to look, the research basis, both in police and prisons in different areas. From DAKSH, their number crunching for years on judiciary, and CSJ in terms of what the grassroots feels like and looks like in reality when we're looking at legal aid. And also I should mention another colleague, I hope I have mentioned everybody. No, I haven't mentioned Vidhi, who also are super policy wonks who know everything about that, go to them for so many other things. But one of the places that I was surprised to get so much cooperation from, and I always like to mention it, is the National NALSA, which is the Legal Aid Authority, and how open they were and how willing they were to change their ways of collecting data, etc., because they were interacting with a civil society group. And last of all, I would like to mention, I don't know, Vale, if Avinash is here, but How India Lives, which took all of the data, and Vale will tell you how much of the data they took and made it into something that is comprehensible to ordinary people. And Vijay, of course, was our guru on all things to do with prisons. So I just wanted to mention how lucky we all have been to be in each other's company. Vale?
Yeah, thank you so much, Maja. You mentioned everyone. So
that's unusual.
Yeah, it's good. So again, I will. Sorry, the screen just went off. Sorry, I'm not able to share the screen. One second. Yeah. So before we come to actually the stories from the justice system, and we have this panel who can illustrate it, who can really make the system alive with their anecdotes and with their deep experience, I would like to talk for a few minutes about why we did this justice report and why is this special. I mean, so far you would have all seen there is much stronger discourse around, say, the health system, the education system, from the civil society and the research ecosystem. There are various interesting ways to present the data, present the findings, or let's say what the situation is within their respective thematic areas, be it health or education. In the justice system, we had seen that the data is there. There's a lot of qualitative research, and Actually, let me change the slide. Yeah. But there wasn't, I mean, the data was presented often in a siloed manner. So what the justice report does is two things. It firstly ranks the data of the justice system across what are the four fundamental pillars of police, prisons, judiciary, and legal aid. And in doing that, it brings together, as I said, these siloed subsystems. We deliberately, and after much debate, I should say, stuck to only using the government data. So it uses the latest government data. It also uses the state's own benchmarks. And what does it do? It assesses the capacity of each state to deliver justice, and it also captures trends over multiple years on these 87 indicators that you will see. So this is the first ranking in the justice system that covers the four pillars of the justice system. So we measure, as I said, police, prisons, judiciary, legal aid. Under these pillars, we measure several themes, which are budgets, human resources, diversity, which is gender and SC/ST and OBC, and trends. In all, we in the latest 2020 report, we had about 87 indicators, and a lot of them were derived. So they were made using other data points. And on data, we have with us Avinash, who can take up all these, who can take on all the questions. Okay, so we had the pillars, we had the themes, and now we wanted to decide how do we cover this massive country. So we went with the idea of clustering, basically trying to compare like with like. And therefore, we divided Indian states into two clusters that were ranked. Cluster 1, which these are states which have a population of over 1 crore. And then the smaller cluster of 7 states, which have a population of less than 1 crore. But together, these clusters 1 and 2, they cover around or roughly 90% of India's population. We also have a third set of states. These are union territories and 4 states where there is AFSP, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which completely kind of changes the dynamics of the justice system. So we have not ranked this third cluster, but there is data for all of them. And as I said, we use government sources only, and these are those sources. So, respective agencies for these respective pillars. And much of it is now, even I think even we can, even I can look at NJDG and come up with some analysis. This process of how do we come to 87 derived indicators, this took us quite a while, and we first identified what are the things that we would like to measure. Unfortunately, as is with all such studies, we had to leave out a lot, and that was mainly because either that data point or that information was not available uniformly, or it wasn't lending itself to a fair comparison for a ranking. Now, there's a lot of data out there that one can put, but in a ranking system, which is what we thought was necessary to elevate the discourse in a sort of dramatic way, we had to leave out some information sets. This data was collected, and finally over 1 lakh data points were collated, analyzed to generate values for those 87 indicators. What are the problems with data? Well, I mean, anybody who's familiar with this ecosystem of government data would know, and I think if I should say that the pandemic has just highlighted what are the fundamental gaps in regard to data in our country, where no figure is actually reliable and everything has a counter to it. And I'm not just talking about social media. We've seen different data sets emerging, and even today we wouldn't know the correct number of people affected by COVID. For example, this is just an example. In the justice system, the data is often scattered. Official data is not collected by a nodal agency, but by different agencies. What we faced was, in constraints in accessing archival materials from the National Judicial Data Grid. There was discrepancy in data between what is there on the legal services website and then what was there on its dashboard. Just for example, we got tremendous cooperation from them. This is an example of some of the issues. there is a lack of standardization of how data is collected by police.
Say it with your eyes.
Right. And to give you an example on the police data, in the 2018, between the 2018 and 2019 BPRD reports, the data on the rank, on the caste category of inspector and deputy SP ranks was not there. The year before that it was there, and then in the 2020 report again that was brought back. So if we are analyzing, then we had to either work with dummy data or find some other recourse when that data set just data point just went missing. Similarly, there is people often also have said that relying on just government data is not maybe the wisest thing, because it's not reliable. So there is a maybe one needs to have some oversight and other verification mechanism to confirm or corroborate this government data, specifically to the justice system. But what is the overall picture that emerges from these two reports? We find that nationally vacancies have stagnated. I think we will see the effect of COVID as the fiscal space has shrunk even more. What happens to the vacancies would be a story that would emerge a few months down the line. What we also see is that rural populations have much less access to justice institutions, and the budgetary priorities of states are not towards the justice system. Maybe police is an exception for some obvious reasons, but not definitely the other pillars. And what has happened is in the 2 years, in these two reports, you also see that the cases have gone up by 10% in high courts and 5% in subordinate courts. This is one way how we've tried to work with available data, which is often considered dry and boring. So we have tried to make it a little more interesting with Avinash's help. And this graphic shows us the number of years a state will take to reach this 33% quota for women, which has been constitutionally approved in the sense of that it's been taken up by several states. It's also a recommendation of the parliament and so on. So what we see is that a state like Madhya Pradesh is going to take about 180 years if things go on as of today at the same pace and in the same way. Then it's going to take nearly like 2 centuries. And the story is not very different from in other states. However, based on the recent performance, a state like Bihar has shown tremendous improvement, and it is now if things go on as they are going today, it would be able to reach this 33% quota in less than 5 years. This is just an example of how data can be presented in a more interesting manner. This graphic again is just simply showing the share of cases. It's states where share of cases is pending for more than 5 years, and we have West Bengal and Madhya Pradesh in the lower judiciary. It's just some examples we wanted to showcase here. Now I want to refer to this. I don't know, some of you might have read this recent column by CHRI N.V. Ramanna, in which he highlighted 4 principles of rule of law. And the boxes have, these are the extracts from his article. So he says, an important aspect of equality before law is having equal access to justice. And now, as our report has found, is the access even there? Forget about it being equal. So on the left, there are some information points, which is to say that when you say equal access to justice, are you easily able to reach a justice institution? And usually it's a police station. So you're not able to do that in states like West Bengal, in states like Himachal and several other states, where the burden of area and population in rural areas is much more as compared to police stations in urban areas. Similarly, the legal services clinic, which is if there is any dispute, and there are disputes galore, if there's any dispute, you should have access to a legal service institution. you should, even without a dispute, have access to to just know your rights, to know the laws and so on. Within jails, there is hardly, a state which has all the jails equipped with VC facilities. And there is a mechanism called the Board of Visitors, which is to, visit and make sure the prisoners' rights have been protected and they have all the access that they need and so on. That also we find that it does not exist. Many officials don't even know about it. And the last data point on the left of the screen is the data that shows between April 19 and March 20, how many times lawyers interacted with clients, I mean, not with the judge, but with clients over VC. And that is zero in a state like Uttar Pradesh. I think the larger point I'm trying to say is that access to justice is not even there, and it's certainly not equal, as we all would agree. The other thing that he said is on the on point about knowing your rights, knowing your laws. So laws must be clear and accessible. The legal, and Sugandha, my colleague, and Professor Raghavan also can throw some light on this. But 80% of Indians are eligible for free legal aid. The body that is responsible for that largely is NALSA, and however, data is showing that the budget for NALSA is being reduced year on year, which will not make access to free legal aid easier at all. Similarly, the paralegal volunteers, their numbers have come down in most states and UTs. And the last point about something as basic as a front desk, when somebody who's not aware of his or her rights walks into a district legal service authority office, there's not even a front desk, there's not even an office in most cases. So it just shows kind of the priority when we say that it should be equal access, and it should, it's very far from ground reality. The other 2 points that Honorable CJI mentioned were about gender equality. So the data here again is abysmal. In police, less than 10%, just about 10% women are police women. And in prisons, this is about 13%. And the glass ceiling very much exists like every other sphere, perhaps a little more in prisons and police. In the judiciary also, there is no quota for a higher judiciary, but even where there is, it's not that it's in most states less than 30%. About the caste diversity, Karnataka is the only state among all states that has met its caste diversity quotas. And finally, the article talks about the right to participate in the creation and refinement of laws. One thing needs to be mentioned, as we found out also in the Parliamentary Standing Committee that Maja was invited to, and a couple of us joined her to present the India Justice Report. The legislative impact of laws as a field is not really evolved in India. It's at a nascent stage, so this needs to be said at the outset. And wherever there is consultation also, as I've myself seen, for example, in the Juvenile Justice Act 2015, it becomes either tokenistic or there's always a feeling of that, they've not talked to us enough. I think Surya, my colleague from DAKSH, might talk about his experience in the E-Courts Committee, of which he's a part of. But by and large, we don't really get to have a say like in some other countries. I think this would cover my data and justice system bit. We have some in the report. We have some recommendations, which are just here for all of you to see. It is to make sure that justice is an essential service, not just police. Justice system, justice as an essential service like health, education. There should be localization at every level. Please put some more money in the justice system. Please capacitate it in a way that it can actually use the money optimally, and make sure there's more and more diversity that reflects the diversity of our country, of our societies, communities. And in prisons specifically, COVID has shown us, we need to have, there are states which have like 60% medical staff vacancies. So in prisons, so at least make sure there's enough medical care provided. CCTVs, the judgment has come. We have to all make sure it's implemented well, undertake performance audits, and revive those local justice delivery mechanisms like Nyaya Panchayats, Gram Nyayalayas, and so on. Yeah, and as we say, justice delivery is not a pity plea; it's our right, and we have to make sure that the state delivers it to us. And this is the best part for me. So I'm through with this presentation. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Awesome, lovely. I'll open the floor for any of you to ask anything related to the presentation. Yeah. Please raise your hand, put it on the chat box, unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, I have a little question. Maybe this is coming out of just curiosity or mostly out of curiosity and not...
is that Abhineet? Is that you?
Abhineet speaking, yes.
Yeah, just when you were asking the question, could you just quickly introduce yourself with your name and
Oh, absolutely, I could do that.
About your... Yeah.
Sure, yeah. My name is Abhineet, by the way. I am what I can call an educator by profession. So far, I've been working in the education system for the last, in various roles. Creating content, checking for quality, or actually just teaching students for the last around 5 years. That's a brief introduction, I'd say. And so, here's the question. In the access to justice bit, when we talk about area, is that accounting for the population densities? Hello?
Avinash, yes.
Yeah. So, Abhineet, hi. So, there are two indicators there. There is one we've taken in terms of area, in terms of square kilometers, and the other is in terms of population, but it's at a state level. So, it does not account for densities, within a state, variances in density within a state. It's entirely at a state level. I agree that this is a bit of a handicap, but again, this is really the best that we could do with the public data that we have. Also, in terms of trying to drill further, there is possibly something to do there, given the tools at our disposal, in the sense that one can map population at a more granular level. It can actually be mapped at as little as say about 450 square meters or something like that. But however, even police stations, I mean, one can plot them using, if we have lat-long data, and then try and work out an indicator of how much population gets, roughly how much population is covered by, say, a police station. But in this case, we were handicapped by information, by what we could do and could not do. So, so to answer your question, no, it does not cover that. It does not consider density. It's at a state level.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
There is a question by Ashwath in the chat box. This is the first time I'm engaging with the status of the justice system in India. I do consider the police justice system are key and play a crucial role in the betterment of the society. I'm wondering, what is the role of technology? Will it help access legal advice at low cost or free? Will it help in streamlining the administrative work and data collection? Or does it make sense to advocate for it in at least one region or state?
Can I take that, Saurabh?
Yeah,
yeah, sure.
Thank you, Maja. Thank you, Vale, Saurabh, Agami, for this opportunity. I've said this many times in the past, the ecosystem view that this report has brought into the justice system is path-breaking, and I congratulate Maja, Vale, for taking the lead on this. So to answer your question specifically, I will come to that in just a minute. Access to justice varies from stage to stage, right? We have talked about access to justice as being to the polis. In some cases, it could be access to the lawyers themselves. In some cases, it could be access to the laws, as the article by the Chief Justice said. So access to justice is not a static point. It is very contextual. It depends on where you are in your awareness, where you are in the dispute life cycle. So awareness of rights is also access to justice, right? So with that in mind, I think when you say what role can technology play in this, it is significant. Yes, technology is not a panacea. It can.
Surya, we lost you. We can't hear you.
Yep. So of course, technology cannot solve all the problems. But if you think about it, can technology be used to provide a tool for citizens to access what is the position of law for their fact pattern, right? There it could play a huge role. Just access to laws in their languages. How many laws of the land are available in languages that people are used to? It's a huge, right? Technology can play a role there. Then when you come to accessing police, and then you come to accessing lawyers, and then the courts, right? Step by step, technology can start playing a more significant role. Once the institution becomes more complex for people to engage with, technology can play a big role. So does it make sense to advocate it for in at least one region or state? It is being advocated for in the entire country. You should please take a look at the phase 3, which is the e-courts phase 3 draft vision document that has been put out. Agami, DAKSH and Vidhi were a part of that. So please do take a look at that document. You will see how end to end it is being it is being imagined how technology can play a role. Of course, technology cannot solve all the problems. It needs its rails and safeguards, but it can be an enabler.
Awesome.
Can I just come in here on the same question?
Yeah.
Yeah. While at a larger level, technology can definitely play an important role, but I'm just trying to bring a couple of situations before us, which will tell us how complex this whole issue of role of technology can be. One is, in India now, video conferencing has been introduced in the Criminal Procedure Code to conduct production of prisoners under trials before courts and also trials, I mean, as far as the law is concerned. Now, let's look at how it actually plays out. Wherever video conferencing, in fact, there's a large number of prisons and which have now been connected with video linkage with the courts. And so, for example, earlier, the law is that you have to be produced before a magistrate or a judge every 14 days, within 14 days. And that used to be physical production. And of course, there were many problems related to that because, the role of the job of producing under trials before the courts is the job of the police as per the CRPC. And so for police, this is not a high priority area. Because police has many functions to play, law and order and bandobast and VIP security and riots and all of that, crime investigation, etc. So there would always be more than a 50% lag in terms of the demand that the prison authorities would put before the police for taking prisoners to court and the actual production of police to do that. Now, technology was seen as a solution to this. And it was thought that if we introduce production of under trials through video conferencing, this problem would get solved. And so it was invested in a very heavy way across the country. You now have large numbers, as I said, where video conferencing is being used. But what has been the outcome of that? Number one, under trials access to lawyers and family members has got restricted. Because earlier they would be taken to court where it was a more open area where the under trial could meet the lawyer, talk to the lawyer. Sometimes even if they don't have a lawyer, they could request people here and there that can I, suggest as lawyer, and somebody would come forward, etc., etc. Secondly, family members found it easier to meet their their relative in court rather than in prison, because that's a more difficult area in terms of mulakat facilities. So that has been one of the, so while it has eased up the whole issue of producing under trials through video linkage, their access to justice has got compromised. So that's the one. Secondly, even through video linkage, there are huge problems in terms of not having access to many of the power shortages, outages, and therefore even the judges also, when they many times they don't have the time to attend to a video linkage session, so they would just give a written, like on the warrant itself, write that yes, the person can be reproduced next time. So this is one example. On the positive side, when the pandemic struck, physical mulakats were suspended across the country. And many of the prison authorities have started video calls by introducing smartphones. And that has been a huge boon, at least to fill the gap to some extent. So that is one example where actually there has been an advantage of using of technology. And the third one I would like to say is because of the pandemic again, physical appearances in courts were almost suspended for more than a year, and virtual hearings were conducted. But there is a huge digital divide here, even in terms of lawyers' access to video linkages. And that has actually been I would say that this one and a half years has been, I would say there's almost been a virtual lockdown of the courts because of, so only urgent matters have been heard. I'm not talking of the high courts and Supreme Courts, because very small percentage of people actually reach the high courts and the Supreme Court. I'm talking of the district courts, and especially the metropolitan magistrates courts. Courts have been on a virtual lockdown. Trials have been completely suspended, and only urgent bail matters are being heard, and that too after a great amount of difficulty. So yes, technology can be a solution, but we have to be very careful about how we go about implementing it.
Maja, do you want to respond to this?
Yeah, sure. I just want to say that I really agree with Vijay. And also in terms of, I just want to talk about two things. One is area. The gentleman who asked about the area, what we took account of was, of course, what we could find, and it's still very nascent and rudimentary. But the principle behind all of the data collection is something that I would like to talk about, which is that when we were looking at it, we were looking at the whether can everybody get to a police station or a court or a legal aid service in the same facility with the same ease as everybody else. And we found, no, you can't. The practical thing that the police always say, or legal aid or anybody says, is that, look, in the middle of a Rajasthan desert, there are hardly any people, and it's far away from everybody. So it doesn't make practical sense to have a great big police station there, or the same amount of policing there as you have in other places. So my answer to that is fine. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, if a woman is hurt, harmed, a child is kidnapped, a man is exploited, will he have to walk for 400 kilometers and 3 days before he can get to justice? If you can't put a police station there, put in technology, put in anything you have to. But my person living there, Maja Daruwala living in the middle of the Thar desert, must be able to get the same level of help from the state that she needs. So the reason I'm giving you this example with so much emphasis is to say that all of this technology that is being brought in must be brought in with some principles behind it. Is it control or is it accountability? How much technology has been brought in to indicate that there will be much more accountability in the system, as opposed to how much control there is of the system? And whose convenience is this for? This VC example that has taken away so much of the protection that used to be afforded by a physical hearing to this video conferencing is taken away at the cost of the accused, because the accused is felt, who is this rubbish fellow? Whereas I have heard arguments and newspapers and reports on the problems of lawyers to accessing video conferencing. But there's no survey about what everybody else feels about video conferencing at all. So I just wanted to emphasize that, we can go mad on the technology, but I suspect that the technology is going to go mad on us.
That's very well put. Yeah. Sabha, I think, yeah. Ashwat, do you want to unmute yourself and state the comment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. As I just mentioned, I think there's a lot more nuances that has come out from your responses. And this is the first time I'm actually engaging in the status of Indian justice system. I feel that this is actually a good spark for me also to read, to kind of start engaging more with this. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing that.
Awesome. While others, while others are thinking about this question, one thing that I was thinking about is, in the course of producing the India Justice Report, like, were there any points that were like absolutely counterintuitive to how you think about like justice system in India? I think there is a perception that everyone has about the way justice system in India works, but like in the course, were some of the basic assumptions or like beliefs that were challenged? And what were they? Like, that is something that I'm curious to understand from all of you, or if there is something that surprised you in the course. And this, anyone, please feel free to answer that question. Yeah.
I wonder if our friend from the police, Devyani, would like to, because there were quite a few things counterintuitive about police.
Yeah, thanks, Vale, and thanks, Maja, and thanks, Saurabh. It's good to be part of this conversation. Very quickly, so I'm Devyani, and I've been part of the police pillar of the IGR since the beginning. May I also take this moment to just share a couple of points that I wanted to elaborate upon, that Vale pointed out. And one of them is the fact that actually it's important to note that there is a lot of data available on the police in India. And I think that stands out when we compare it to countries, particularly in the subcontinent, but even similar economies, elsewhere. So that's important to know. And I think the source, because somebody asked the source for prison data. So the source on police primarily is this report that the Bureau of Police Research and Development publishes every year. It's called Data on Police Organizations in India. It essentially provides you data on the structural and the administrative issues of policing. But it's a great it's a great source to think about a lot of policing issues. So that's one. But it's also important to keep in mind that because policing is a state subject, and because it's also a very hierarchical organization, therefore, like in any other data source, disaggregated data becomes really crucial to focus on. And so while the macro data, India pan-India data tells us that there's 20% vacancies in the police at any given point of time, when we actually break it down per ranks, and looking at ranks becomes very important because the powers are very limited to certain ranks. So when you look at rank wise, it stands out that actually the investigating ranks, the vacancy is much, much higher than, say, the constabulary, which is essentially your foot soldiers in the policing system in the country, which doesn't have the power to investigate. So, so that's when you're sort of beginning to engage with the justice system and policing particularly, That's one thing to keep in mind. Constantly look at the rank wise, because that will tell you the real story on the ground. That's one. So the question now on what was it that we discovered, or what was counterintuitive for us in the process. It was interesting because while this data source has been there for a very long time, and at least 10-year data now is available online, and then the previous years is also available. And we, people who've been researching on policing have been engaging with this. But when you start looking at it, collectively with other systems, justice systems, as well as over the years, there were interesting trends that emerged that we had actually not paid attention to. And so, for instance, again, looking at the issue of vacancy, it stands out that it's not so straightforward that you've got, say, 100 vacancies in a given year, and so the next recruitment cycle you can easily fill that 100 vacancy. It actually takes 3 to 4 years to fill, to complete one recruitment cycle in the police system, and so therefore the vacancies have sort of keep building on. That was interesting. The data points on women, now women, having more women in police has become a very, very important policy issue. Because the law requires it, of course, justice demands it, the requirements of representation, demands it. So all of that recognition has been there. But when you look at the trends, as trends on how it's being achieved, it again stands out how much time it takes from the policy commitment to achieve to the stage where you reach a certain number. So Bihar, for instance, which is currently the highest, in terms of representation of women in its police, so it's reached 25%, and this has to be said with a caveat, because one has to verify whether this data source is actually true, but that's what they've reported, so we'll go with it. In 2013 is when the Bihar government had first announced the policy of 33% in the police, but also 35% more generally in other government services. And so you're looking at nearly 8 years now, 7 to 8 years that it takes to increase at that rate. I think those are sort of the policy issues that stand out for us as researchers, as advocates, that we didn't realize earlier. And the other thing that sort of stands out is how very little standards exist, because we have only used the data points, as Valay pointed out, on which there's some standard. And what we repeatedly, what came across is that actually the entire exercise of laying standards. So when you ask the question of area, there's actually a very old standard that exists that says that one police station must service at least this 150 square kilometer of area. But that is very specific to a rural setting, a rural police station. You don't have anything similar to that for a city. Certainly not cities, of today, which are is so dense in population, etc. So what is the right amount of area? All of that exercise hasn't happened, or is not yet complete in any case. So that has been revealing, because it provides another advocacy point for, again, researchers and advocates. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Fascinating. Does anyone else want to contribute to this? Yeah, Surya, Prakash, please.
So just building on what Devyani said, it reminded me of another point about the life cycle from a policy decision to implementation, and why these kind of reports are important. So at the Bangalore launch of the India Justice Report last year, when the point about how poorly the Karnataka High Court fares on female judges was being made, a retired Supreme Court judge said, I come from this High Court, so I'm a bit disappointed with this finding, because we have done so much on this front. Because you should realize that the High Court judges are drawn from the bar and the district judicial service. There has to be a pool for us to draw from, and that has improved dramatically, and which was borne out by the numbers, that at the district court level, the proportion of female judges has steadily increased, and correspondingly there will be a change in the bar. So once there is a pool for us to choose from, the High Court numbers will also increase. So it just, what Devyani says completely made sense if I recollect that conversation, that it is a life cycle. Implementation to actual impact is a life cycle. We have to be aware of that, but we have to constantly use these reports like these and rankings like these. Of course, it will need fine-tuning, improvement, but it has its own life cycle.
Awesome.
Yeah, can I just come in with a very short point?
Yes,
while
yes,
we all try to use data and reports and research as pegs to push for policy change. Unfortunately, in our country, policy change often comes out because of some major incident. And if you see, the biggest amount of reforms in our laws took place after the Nirbhaya incident. I mean, it's not as if these issues were not being flagged earlier. Similarly, when it comes to police stations, I remember the maximum number of increase of police stations in Mumbai city took place after the 92 riots, because that was the time when the police were able to make a pitch before the politicians that the riots went out of hand because we did not have enough police. So this is also a very hard reality of our country, that we don't go by research, we don't go by statistics. And this is also one of the reasons why reports like the India Justice Report become very important as talking points. And unless and until there is a public debate around these issues, and more people become aware and educated about what are the issues in the justice system, I think decisions will continue to be taken in an ad hoc manner.
I would just like to stress on the point that Devyani made on the lack of standards, or I would actually want to make a point on the basis of forming a particular standard. So, for example, the Model Prison Manual, it lays down that there should be one medical staff 300 prisoners, right? And if we look at the prison statistics India, the latest one, 2019, according to it, the ratio overall is within that limit, so one medical staff for 243 prisoners. But when you look at these things at the ground level, you realize that how problematic this is, in the prisons context, and especially now in the COVID situation, right? So, we really don't know the basis of how these standards have also been laid down in the Model Prison Manual. So it does not explain as to whether this has been taken from some international standard, or what is the basis. So it's very very strange on certain aspects, and this is one of the limitations, that we have to go by what the national standard is saying. But when we also want to question the standard itself, right?
Yeah. There is a question by Niyati, which says the report highlights that the justice system was ailing much before the pandemic started. How would you evaluate its ability to cope now in this new reality? Would love to take responses from all of you. Vijay, Surya, Maja, Devyani, anyone.
At least as far as prisons are concerned, I have understanding about prisons and legal aid to some extent. As far as prisons are concerned, it has actually helped in bringing focus on prisons as institutions, because there's been so much of writing about the whole issue of COVID spreading inside prisons. And I'm afraid, as far as the administration is concerned, not necessarily from a very humanistic point of view, but more from a fear factor point of view, that if it spreads and if there are deaths, and how the whole world will come crashing on them, and therefore one needs to do something. So there has been an attempt to address at least some of the gaps, especially for example in Maharashtra, for example, the Bombay High Court took a very strong position on this and has looked at the whole issue of vacancies in medical posts, and has instructed the government that within this month, by the end of July, all medical positions should be filled up. So in some ways, it has brought a little bit of focus on prisons as far as the pandemic is concerned. Or for example, allowing family members to talk to the prisoners being allowed to talk to their family members on the telephone or through video calls is something that they were earlier resisting, and now they've had to do it, and they found that it hasn't really caused much of problems. Or the fact that the high-powered committee got set up by the Supreme Court, and large numbers of under trials and convicts were released on bail and on parole, and the hell has not broken down. More than 70,000 people under trials were released, and it's not as if crime rates have gone up tremendously because of that. So some of those myths have broken down. But when it comes to legal aid, our understanding, the ground situation here is that the legal aid system has actually coiled back. And the reason for that is that lawyers who are on the legal aid panel, they were themselves in such a bad situation because of the pandemic. They lost work, they lost practice, that they were not willing to come forward and take up cases on the legal aid board because the honorarium that's paid to them is so low, and public transport was difficult and all of that. So the legal aid system actually, almost went into a shell. And even today, that's the situation. So, I mean, it's a kind of a mixed picture.
So I could respond on the judiciary side. I think a lot of the things that on the prison side that Vijay Raghavan sir mentioned are also relevant to the judiciary. A lot of myths got busted, like how cases could go on without having come to a place, especially civil side. Criminal is a different matter, right? So you don't need a place for a court to function. But having said that, I think it is a very layered response. The high courts and the Supreme Court seem to have done fairly better. The district courts have not at all. So the numbers that we have got are that, there is now a 10% increase in high court numbers, while it is, only 10 out of the 9 were disposed of, but now it is 6 out of 10. So 60% versus 90% in the past. So it's a steep fall while you compare it with the previous normal, if you can call that normal. So again, technology has helped. It has shown how people don't have access to technology uniformly. It is an opportunity. It has shown people how things can work if you gave them the support. So it is, I think we're all still learning from it. But from a resilience perspective, because of the powers and the capacity, the high courts seem to have been better equipped to respond rather than the district courts, clearly.
Awesome.
I would like to just say one thing, that we did a crude analysis of the rankings of the justice report with the rankings of, say, ease of doing business, or there is another status of investment potential index. What we see is that the states that have that seem to have a better justice system are also the states that are doing better on those financial indices. So therefore, in general, the southern states do much better than the states in the north. And obviously, UP, you said counterintuitive. So UP was not counterintuitive. Tamil Nadu coming behind, or Kerala coming behind on some indicators was counterintuitive. So, for example, Maja would never agree that the police in Kerala is worse off in terms of capacity than, say, Bihar. So these were some of the things that the last data sets managed to hide or mislead in a sense. So we are careful. About that. How will it cope in the future? I think we haven't really mentioned rights in this conversation. So I think the justice system and its performance is also manifested in how citizens themselves feel about the justice system. And that is something that I suppose is a lived experience, and for each one it's different. But we have seen over the last 2-3 years the kind of clampdown that has happened by the law enforcement, and we've also seen the oversight practiced by the judiciary. So these are questions that go beyond data. and these are political questions. So when we say how will the system cope after the pandemic, I think we have to keep in mind also that, as Maja said, what is this technology for? If you make your police like American police, US police, what will it be used for? And so on. So those are also questions that I suppose there's no answer to that question yet, but yeah, those are questions that we have to keep in mind.
Abhineet, you had asked a question. Do you want to ask that?
Sure. I think Vijayanagan maybe has answered that. I was just trying to read the chat there. So you had mentioned about a few thousand prisoners that were released, right? Not prisoners. In fact, they're under trials, right? That they were released, and you mentioned that no help, frankly, broke loose. I was just kind of wondering, was there a basis on which they were released? I mean, were they segregated, categorized as different kinds of under trials?
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, the Supreme Court set up what are known as high-part committees in each state, which is chaired by the chairperson of the State Legal Services Authority, the Home Secretary, and the DG Prisons. And this 3-member committee was asked to identify categories of prisoners who could be considered for release. And they kind of identified categories. Most of them have looked at prisoners who are arrested for less serious offenses, or persons with beyond a certain age, like in some HPCs looked at that 70 plus prisoners, or age wise. Some looked at comorbidities, very few actually. Most of them looked at offense category. They excluded prisoners arrested under terror cases or financial frauds or sexual crimes, and the rest were considered for release. In fact, that's also a logic that we would like to challenge, because then the whole logic of why you're releasing somebody is lost, because it's a health pandemic. And so your consideration should be age, disability, comorbidities, etc., rather than offense criteria. But whatever it is, these are the criteria that was largely used. And in the chat box, Sugandha has put down, there's a superb tracker on COVID releases and HPC minutes, etc., that is there on the CHRI website.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much again.
Awesome. We are near time, but one last question that I want to ask all the experts available here. How does like community of people who just care about like the justice system in India like really start participating? I think people who don't necessarily come from a legal background or like has access to like that sort of expert knowledge, but are keen on contributing and participating in this space. Like how does one like begin to start engaging on this, and what are some of the things that they can do? That's just an open question for all of us.
You work pro bono for all of us. No, but I'm not joking. You see, presently, quite seriously, I'm not talking about the India Justice Report. I'm talking about people like Vijay and all of the other people who are NGOs, people who are academics, etc. As we go forward, what I'm seeing is that the space for conversation has reduced. So we want to have conversations. Very much we are accused of, oh, you're talking to each other, oh, you're an echo chamber. But we're an echo chamber unless somebody starts listening. And of course, now we have social media and all of these things, and none of us are not aware of this. So we want to talk about, we use these spaces, etc. But we also want other people to start engaging. And don't start engaging, I would say, starry-eyed, that, you will engage and we will change the system. I've been working on it unsuccessfully for 25, 30 years. Now, that could be because I'm just plain dumb, but it also could be that it's a very hard thing to keep on changing, And the other thing is, very slowly, these kinds of things that we attempt, like getting data together, somebody asked this question about it, and I wanted to also talk about it, is that one of the things that I was really surprised about is that if a group of people like ourselves could get together on an idea, why is it that people who are working on it day to day, like your DG of prisons and your police, somebody or the other, why are they not looking at data across departments? Because how do you make policies if you're a chief secretary and you only have a partial data set? Wouldn't you like to have a full data set on a spreadsheet in front of you? That simple idea makes me worry about what is the accountability within the system that you think you can make high policy without having to account for how you made that policy. So that was one other thing. And the thing that Vijay was talking about, where the High Court has said in so many days, you have to get medical officers in. Now, I'm not sure whether it means medical officers of every kind or just doctors, but there are intractable problems also. Across India, for even people like Medanta, doctors are at a premium. The last place that a doctor is going to go after he's got his degree is a government prison. So this kind of data and the kind of conversation that it has thrown up also seeks to find new solutions. It's not going to be doctors because there are none. You're not going to get a specialist gynecologist or heart specialist to come to a thing. So are they, okay, stop thinking about it. I mean, stop going back to the court and saying, I don't have doctors, I don't have doctors. But do you have paramedics? Do you have a connection with the local teaching hospital? If you don't have lawyers, do you have paralegals? Have you created paralegals? Have you made an attempt to create paralegals? What are you doing about that? The issue is you've got a health crisis. How are you going to finish it? How are you going to fill it? That is where your mind has to go. And I think that in a way, these conversations which are outside of the bureaucratic round and round and round, I've got a problem, I don't know a solution, I've got the judiciary on my back, I don't know what to do. You know, going away from that and going to a solution because you've got your citizenry, which is Maja, Daruwala and Saurabh and Vijay and Surya. You've got your citizenry saying, hey, try this. And that's your right to participate.
Yeah, very well put, Maja. Yeah, I think on that note, we can close the session. It was very lovely to hear the kind of participation that all of us had. For everyone who is participating, Justice Hub is a platform for people to share their data sets openly in law and justice. This is one of the problems that the entire ecosystem faces, where some people have access to some data, and use of data just grows exponentially if everyone shares openly. So I invite everyone to come on forum.justicehub.in and continue to engage on this topic as well as other topics related to law, justice, and data. On that note, thank you so much, Maja, Valay, Vijay, Surya, Devyani, Sugandha, all of you for taking out time to talk to the community. And we hope to organize more such events and continue to get insights from all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.